And what a surprise. While so much changes, so much stays the same. Despite the fact that we are, the best part of 16 months into dealing with coronavirus, there are still people who think that it affects your bottom. Now, I don't know why people go and buy as much toilet paper as they do during corona. I don't understand. Fauci has never given us contradictory evidence about this, all right? We're not talking about single ply, double ply, triple ply, but for some reason, this bloke, that's what he was buying today, because, of course, lockdown begins in a couple of hours' time, and our thoughts, of course, are with everyone who's going to have to suffer and suffer under the leadership of an acting premier that's just as bad as the actual premier.
Victoria will enter a 7-day circuit breaker lockdown. If we make the wrong choice now, if we wait too long, this thing will get away from us.
And, of course, there is a media that loves the sensationalism of all of this. These are two cartoons that popped up in the Age newspaper today. Now, remember, obviously, anyone who gets seriously crook as a result of coronavirus, we don't want that to happen. But the actual number of people likely to die in Australia, remember, 99% of course, it's not pleasant, but there it is, the hammer and sickle, not once but twice in the papers today, help feeding the fear that has led to this lockdown. But there is, as always, a question, which is the question of proportionality. For some reason, on this side of the border, Gladys Berejiklian in New South Wales, while she's not perfect, understands proportionality. When things were starting to get out of control on the northern beaches of Sydney in the lead up to Christmas, they didn't shut the entire state down, let alone the entire city down. There was local government areas that were shut down. Yet a decision has been made, of course, to cut off all of Victoria from the rest of the country and regional areas that don't need to be cut off. But let me show you this about where the intensity of the problem is, that I would argue that you don't even need to lock down all of Melbourne right now because of the 34 cases. Now, you've got to watch this because this number is going to bounce around the next couple of days. 34 active cases. Well, 8 of those are actually in hotel quarantine, so immediately dropped to 26. But how's this? Of the 11 local council areas in Victoria where the coronavirus is currently in existence, 12 of those cases, 12 of the 26 are in one local council area alone. 4 local council areas have just 2 cases in their council areas, and 6 local government areas have got just 1 confirmed case. Now, to show that to people, this is the map of the council areas in and around Melbourne. You can see that we are talking about a very specific and very small number of those that have been affected. There is not a huge trouble. Now, you see the map of the state, and then you can start to see the coloured in areas. The red is that area of Whittlesea with 12. And then it's Casey, Darebin, Hume, Kingston, Maribyrnong, Melbourne, Melton, Port Phillip are the ones that are also worth talking about here. But let's stretch out the map so even the Victorian government can understand this. Melbourne isn't all of Victoria, yet all of Victoria will go into lockdown at midnight tonight. Because of the 79 local government areas in all of the state of Victoria, just 11 are the ones that have actually got the cases in them, and just 1 has got more than 2 people that have been infected. Proportionality is the answer. But for some reason, what was at one point stop the spread is now save the contact tracer. This is bad news, and it's something that is going to affect regional Victorians even harder than those in Melbourne. And while our sympathy is with, yes, the majority who live in the city, have a think about the people who live in the parts of Victoria where the virus does not exist, yet they have been sent to their room for the next week. Ray runs the Hotel Shamrock, which is in Bendigo, and he's one of those many locals that are going to have to go home for a week, and his business has been so heavily hit, and he's on the line to chat to us now. Ray, what have you had to do today to get in preparation for a shutdown that's going to last a week?
Yeah, Paul, it's devastating for a start. I mean, we've gone through such a terrible, terrible time, and we had the 5-day lockdown in February. What do we have to do? Number one, we had to immediately contact all of our staff and tell them that they no longer will be required for the next week. We have kept two staff on as a skeleton team just to keep the phones manned, I suppose. That's about all I can say there. We've had to look at all our food that we've got stored in our fridges. We've got to freeze whatever we can freeze, save whatever we can save. The phones have been ringing non-stop. Accommodation has been wiped out. this weekend we're completely 100% booked, right through to the next week, and God knows what's going to happen the week after. So my poor staff have been ringing those people have been ringing us. It's just a real hassle. I mean, and look, the poor kids that are working for us, they're not going to get any money for the next week. Those that have got some holiday pay, they might be able to use that. The casuals, they'll get zero. So we're going to be asking the governments to try and assist us here. They caused this. They're responsible for the control of this. I've got to put the blame squarely on them. And they can say whatever they like. Oh, this is difficult. It's a pandemic. They know it's that. They've had, over 12 months to get their act together, and they keep failing. And that really, really peeves us off. So we'll be looking
and does it make any sense to you that regional areas get punished for whatever the heck is happening, not even in all of Melbourne, but essentially in one major council area in the north of Melbourne? Does that make sense to anyone you talk to today?
No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. It's so frustrating. I mean, everyone we speak to just cannot believe what's happening. And look, they're angry. They're frustrated and they're angry. I think we could handle it in our area. There's no doubt about that. And look, a hotel like mine, which really does rely on tourism, and tourism comes from Melbourne big time. So shutting down Melbourne shuts me down anyhow, regardless of what we can do in our own community here. But yeah, we can't see the point. We're frustrated. We're angry. Look, we understand the seriousness of the disease. There's no problem about that, and we're sympathetic. And probably the fact that it's got out of control, it needed something, but not to the extent that they've taken this. We don't agree with it.
I'm with you. Ray, strength to you and all of the community in the next little while. We'll keep checking in with you, mate. Let's go from Bendigo now to the central city, right now where Luke is running a restaurant in the CBD. His problems would be just as similar as Ray's, but it's even more intense, of course, about what's been happening in and around Melbourne, mate. How are you holding up after having to effectively shut up shop with just a few hours' notice?
Yeah, look, Paul, it's devastating. Absolutely devastating. But it's not just about me. It's the poor staff. I feel like the state government here in Victoria are the worst at hotel quarantine, the worst at contact tracing, the worst at being honest with the public, and the worst at being honest with themselves. At the end of the day, the business owners suffer, and that flows down to our poor employees. Thought this Labor government was supposed to be for the worker. What about the casualised workforce tonight? Where's the food going to come from this week? The money to pay for it? Shifts cancelled. I've spent a day in both of my businesses. Both are on the fringe of the CBD, and it's just devastation. They're so upset, and you try to throw your arms around them and support them, but you can't really give them answers because the damage isn't just the short lockdown. Already you can see the bookings that are booked for weeks and weeks ahead are already getting really, really scared of what could happen because we're all scarred of what happened during the second lockdown. And we don't believe what the government says. All we hear from the Victorian government is blame, 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 whether it be a poorly trained security guard, be it a nebuliser, be it a banking app, be it the public's fault or a business's fault. Nothing's ever their fault. And yet we're all left to pick up the broken pieces. And we're left in pieces because we are broken. And, New South Wales has proven time and time again that they can balance by keeping the economy open and by implementing restrictions to keep the hospitals empty of COVID patients and finding some sort of balance. And they did so without shutting businesses. But in Victoria, every single time we see the same outcome. A case escapes into the community, a contact tracing system fails, they're overwhelmed, and it's instant lockdown. And it's the small business owners and all of our employees that pay the price of lockdown. Billions are going to be lost from the economy. Businesses were only just starting to recover as restrictions were easy. And now many, again, are going to be pushed to the brink, and some will unfortunately go under because they live week to week. And you talk about the CBD, how much further is this going to set it back? Everybody that I know that has a business in the CBD, it's just beyond comprehension how hard it's been. So what sort of setback?
And I bet they're not going to put off all of the taxes or all of the taxes that come with employing people, and they're certainly not going to put off your rent for the next week or so. Luke, we're going to check in with you again on the other side of things, mate, because I just want to keep a clip up here because you said something absolutely correct that I want to try to reinforce here, which is how the Victorian government, well, they will never take the blame. But today they were throwing plenty of blame. Now remember, one of the dumbest things they are going to do for the next week is to tell kids they don't have to go to school. This is despite the fact that you know and I know, everyone here knows, that kids are not the problem. There are no examples in Australia of kids giving it to each other at school, passing it on to a teacher, or a teacher passing it on to the kids. So they should be in school. You know that, I know that. You're able to drop kids off without having to get near their mates or anything like that. That is one of the dumbest things that's happening. But the acting Premier, as I said, is just as bad as the actual Premier. And here is what James Merlino was trying to say today when people were asking him questions about how dodgy his contract tracing system is.
Look, it helps no one. It helps no one if I'm just standing here blaming circumstances or blaming individuals or blaming governments.
Except he was willing to play the blame game, instantly turning it to Canberra.
If we had an alternative to hotel for this particular variant of concern, we would not be here today. If we had the Commonwealth's vaccine program effectively rolled out, we may well not be here today talking about these circuit breaker restrictions that we must impose to keep our community safe.
And while this idiot is throwing mud, the Prime Minister is standing tall with the people who are going to have to suffer as a result of the idiots running the show in Victoria.
The next 7 days in Victoria will be very challenging. And of course, we are very mindful of the distress and the difficulty that this will impose upon people right across Victoria as a result of what is being described, rightly I think, by the acting Premier as a circuit-breaking lockdown. I want to commend the Victorian Government and the acting Premier for their efforts over recent days in particular, and I especially want to thank the contact tracers in Victoria for the very difficult job that they are engaged in. I particularly want to thank the 40,411 Victorians who yesterday got tested in a record day. I also want to thank the 30,426 Victorians who got vaccinated yesterday.
Surprise you that each way Albo is all about the politics?
It's particularly tough because this could have been avoided. Labor has been saying for a long period of time that the government had two jobs this year: to get quarantine right and to get the rollout of the vaccine right.
So let's deal with this talking point that is one that's been echoed from everyone from the Greens to each way Albo, all in between, right? Here's the deal. Should more Australians be vaccinated by now? Absolutely. But was there a major pause because of the problems that we had with AstraZeneca coming from the UK? Yes. Was there also a slight delay because of the issues about blood clotting? Yes. Is it a good enough reason that not enough people have been vaccinated? No. But, and it's a big but, even if you have been vaccinated, would each way like to pick up the phone and talk to the Health Minister of Queensland, because that moron made it very clear that it doesn't even matter if you've been vaccinated, you will still be sent to your room. This is what that clown said the other day about vaccinations.
They stop you from getting very, very ill and likely to end up in ICU or losing your life. But it doesn't stop you carrying the virus and potentially transmitting it to someone else.
So hang on. This is the each way bet, right? Not enough people have been vaccinated, but even if you have been vaccinated, you still have to go to your room. Welcome to these morons who are allegedly in charge of the way that the show works. Thank goodness for ScoMo running things. Now, if you do want to find somebody to blame, I'll give you somebody to blame. It's Premier Marshmallow in South Australia. Because Premier Marshmallow in South Australia, that clown, well, he's turned around, and remember, he was running hotel quarantine. And how did the virus end up getting to Victoria? Well, as we learned today via David Sympathy reporting in the Australian newspaper, that somebody left a door open between two people. It then made it from one room to another, and a 3-page report showed that that was the case. But even then, after the person left hotel quarantine, they tested negative. It was only after they went back to Victoria that they ended up testing positive and thus ended up spreading the virus around Victoria. So if you want somebody to blame everyone, if you're looking for a Liberal politician, Premier Marshmallow in South Australia and his hotel quarantine system, okay? As for telling people to get vaccinated but you still have to go to your room, it is insane. That said, if you'd like to earn some money in the next little while and you're watching us in Victoria, the Victorian government, yes, the taxpayer, they will pay you to stay at home after you've had a COVID test. So feel free to get a test in the next little while and maybe take some of their money back, which I know technically is yours, but there we go. And also, if we're talking about the geniuses running state government at the moment, what about this? In Queensland, where, yes, the same idiot health minister tells you that it doesn't matter if you have the vaccine, you still have to go to your bedroom. Have I made that point clear to people? That's the message being sent by these lunatics with full power. This was an image which turned up in the Courier Mail in March, where two people who were in hotel quarantine, potentially with COVID, were able to reach across the balcony and start passing stuff as if they were prisoners between their rooms. Despite the promise that this will never happen again, guess what happened this week? The same bloody thing happened in Queensland yet again, where things are being handed between each other. So spare me the ScoMo bashing. You can go after Marshmallow if you want, but perhaps the most annoying news on top of all of this lockdown is Daniel Andrews is planning to come back to work as early as the end of next week.